They told you to start a business so you could be free. But no one warned you that freedom can quietly turn into a cage. You wake up earlier than everyone else. You sleep later than you should. Your mind never shuts off. Your phone becomes your boss. And somehow, the thing you built to give you life starts taking it away from you. You don't own the business owns you. And that realization, that silent, uncomfortable truth, is where this audiobook begins. Because in this audiobook, Business That Runs Itself, How to Build a Business That Runs Without You, you're going to learn something most entrepreneurs never fully understand. How to build something that works, even when you don't. Not someday, not when you scale, not when you hire a team, but by design. From the beginning, you will discover why most businesses fail, not because of lack of effort, but because of misplaced effort. You will understand the 3 identities that secretly control your business decisions. You will learn how to shift from operator to architect, from worker to system builder, from being needed to being optional. And yes, we will go deeper. We will break down how to build a business with no employees, how to leverage systems, automation, digital leverage, and modern tools in 2025, how to create something that runs quietly in the background while your life moves forward. Because here is the truth most people avoid. If your business stops when you stop, you didn't build a business. You built a job with pressure. And here's the punchline you need to hear early. If you have to show up for it to work, you don't own a system. You own a responsibility. Let that sit with you. This is not financial advice. This is not a shortcut promise. This is a framework for thinking differently, building differently, and living differently. Now, before we go further, ask yourself something honestly. Why did you really want to start a business? Was it money, freedom, control over your time? Or was it something deeper, something you couldn't fully explain, but you felt it in your chest when you imagined a different life? Hold that thought, because by the end of this audiobook, you will either realize you were building the wrong thing, or you will finally understand how to build it right. And what we're about to uncover first is the invisible trap that almost every entrepreneur walks into without realizing it. A trap that looks like ambition, feels like progress, but slowly turns into exhaustion. And once you see it, you will never unsee it again. Chapter 1. The Hidden Trap Nobody Talks About. There's a moment that happens quietly. No announcement, no warning, no dramatic shift. Just a slow realization. At first, everything feels exciting. You start small. Maybe it's a service, maybe a digital product, maybe freelancing. You get your first client, your first payment, your first validation, and for a while, it feels like you made the right decision. You're in control. You're building something. You're moving. But then something changes. The messages increase. The tasks multiply. The responsibility grows. And instead of building a system, you start reacting to everything. Every email, every request, every small problem becomes yours. You become the center of the business. And at first, that feels powerful. But over time, it becomes heavy. Because now, everything depends on you. If you stop answering, things slow down. If you take a day off, things pile up. If you disappear, things break. And this is where most people get stuck. Not because they lack discipline, not because they lack intelligence, but because they build themselves into the center of everything. They become the business. And once that happens, freedom disappears. There's a line buried inside many entrepreneurial journeys, a quiet shift where passion turns into pressure. You stop creating. You start managing chaos. You stop enjoying the process. You start surviving it. And the worst part? From the outside, it still looks like success. People see movement, they see income, they see growth. But they don't see the cost, the late nights, the constant stress, the inability to step away. This is the trap. And it's subtle, because it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like responsibility. But responsibility without structure becomes a prison. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you can't fully disconnect, even for a few hours? Have you ever checked your phone while trying to relax, just in case something goes wrong? Have you ever felt guilty for stepping away from your own business? That's not freedom. That's dependency. And dependency is the opposite of what you wanted. The truth is simple, but uncomfortable. Most people don't build businesses. They build dependency loops. And until you break that loop, you will always be needed. And if you're always needed, you are never free. Now here's where things start to shift. Because once you understand the trap, you can start asking a better question. Not, how do I grow this business? But, how do I remove myself from it without breaking it? That question changes everything. It forces you to think differently. It forces you to stop chasing activity and start building structure. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down the 3 identities inside every entrepreneur, the ones that silently decide whether you build a business or build your own cage. And once you see which one is controlling you right now, you'll understand why everything feels harder than it should. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Chapter 2. The 3 identities that control your business. There are 3 versions of you inside your business right now. Not metaphorically, not philosophically, functionally. 3 different ways you think. 3 different ways you act. 3 different forces pulling your decisions in opposite directions. And whichever one is in control determines whether your business becomes freedom or becomes a trap. The first one is the worker. The second is the manager. And the third is the architect. Most people never realize this. They just feel the tension. They feel pulled in different directions, but they don't know why. Let's slow this down, because this is where everything begins to change. The worker inside you is the one that wants to do everything. This is the version of you that says, I'll just handle it myself. It's faster if I do it. No one can do it like I can. And on the surface, that sounds responsible. It sounds committed. It sounds like someone who cares. But here's the truth most people avoid. The worker builds speed, but destroys scale. Because every time you step in to do something manually, you reinforce a system where you are required. You become the solution to every problem, and that feels good in the moment. Until it doesn't. Until you realize you can't step away, you can't pause, you can't breathe without something depending on you. That's the worker's trap. And it's dangerous because it feels productive. Then there's the manager. The manager doesn't want to do everything. The manager wants control, organization, structure. This is the version of you that starts creating lists, tracking tasks, optimizing schedules, and this is progress. This is where many people feel like they're getting serious. But here's the catch. The manager organizes chaos, but doesn't eliminate it. You're still in the center. You're just managing the storm better. You're still the decision maker, still the problem solver, still the one everything flows through. And again, this feels like improvement, but it's not freedom. It's just a cleaner version of dependency. And then there's the architect. This is the version of you most people never fully step into because it requires something uncomfortable: letting go. The architect doesn't ask, "How do I do this faster?" The architect asks, "Why does this need to be done manually at all?" The architect doesn't manage tasks. The architect removes them, replaces them, automates them, systemizes them. The architect looks at the business not as a series of actions, but as a machine, a system, a structure that can operate without constant human input. This is the shift, the real shift, and it's not easy, because stepping into the architect role means confronting something most people avoid. You are not the business. You are the builder of the system. And if the system depends on you, it's incomplete. Let's make this real. Imagine two people starting the same type of business, same idea, same tools, same starting point. The first person operates as the worker. They take every call, answer every message, deliver every product manually. They grow slowly, but they're busy all the time. The second person steps into the architect mindset early. They ask, "How can this be delivered automatically? How can this be standardized? How can this run without constant input?" They build systems from day one, and at first, it feels slower, less exciting, less productive. But over time, something shifts. Their business starts running, even when they're not there. And that's the difference. Not talent, not intelligence, not luck. Thinking, structure, identity. Now here's where it gets deeper. Because most people don't stay in just one role. They switch constantly. Worker in the morning, manager in the afternoon. Occasionally thinking like an architect, but not committing to it. And that inconsistency is what keeps them stuck, because systems require commitment. They require patience. They require you to slow down now so you can speed up later. And most people never make that trade. They chase speed. They chase activity. They chase the feeling of progress without building anything that lasts. So let me ask you something again. Which version of you is running your business right now? Be honest. Are you doing everything? Are you managing everything? Or are you building something that can run without you? Because your answer to that question is your future. And here's a line you need to remember moving forward. The worker makes money, the manager controls it, the architect multiplies it. And if you never step into that third role, you will always be trading time for something that was supposed to give you freedom. In the next chapter, we're going to break down something even more dangerous, something invisible, something that feels like progress, but is actually the reason most businesses collapse over time. It's not lack of effort, it's not lack of skill, it's something far more subtle. And once you see it, you'll understand why so many people work harder and still go nowhere. Chapter 3. The Illusion of Progress. There's a feeling that can quietly destroy your future while convincing you that you're moving forward. It's subtle. It doesn't feel like failure. It doesn't feel like laziness. It feels like effort. It feels like you're doing everything right. But it's not progress. It's motion without direction. And this is where most businesses slowly break. Without realizing it, you wake up, you check messages, you respond to clients, you handle small tasks, you fix problems, you move things forward one step at a time. At the end of the day, you're exhausted. And if someone asked you, "Did you work today?" you'd say yes, because you did. But if they asked you a different question, "Did you build something today that will still work tomorrow without you?" that's where things get quiet. Because most days, the answer is no. This is the illusion. Activity feels like progress. But activity is temporary. Systems are permanent. And if you spend all your time in activity, you never build permanence. You just maintain momentum until you can't. Let me say this clearly. Being busy is not the same as building something that lasts. You can spend 12 hours working and still be stuck in the same place 6 months later, because every hour you invest is tied directly to your presence. You show up, it works. You disappear, it stops. That's not growth. That's dependency scaling, and it's dangerous. There's a concept hidden inside many entrepreneurial failures, a pattern that repeats over and over again. People believe that if they keep working harder, eventually things will become easier. But that only works if what you're building reduces your effort over time. If your effort stays the same, or worse, increases, then you're not building upward, you're building outward. And outward growth without structure always collapses. Think about this for a moment. Imagine carrying a backpack. At the beginning, it's light, easy, you can move fast. But every day, you add one more item, a task, a responsibility, a commitment. At first, it's manageable, but eventually, it becomes heavy, then exhausting, then unbearable. And what most people do is try to become stronger, work harder, push more, instead of asking the real question, why am I still carrying everything myself? This is where the shift happens, because the goal is not to become stronger. The goal is to carry less, to remove, to simplify, to design, to build something that doesn't require constant effort to exist. In one of the reference ideas we studied, there's a recurring truth. Most people don't fail because they lack passion. They fail because they confuse doing the work with building the business. That confusion is everything, because doing the work feels productive, but building the system feels slow. It feels like you're not moving. It feels like you're falling behind. And that's why most people avoid it. They stay in motion. They stay busy. They stay reactive. Because slowing down to build systems feels uncomfortable. It forces you to stop, to think, to question everything, to admit that what you've been doing might not be sustainable. Let me ask you something that might challenge you. If you stopped working for 7 days, what would happen to your business? Would it continue? Would it slow down? Or would it completely stop? Be honest, because that answer is the difference between a system and a job. Now here's where things get uncomfortable, because most people already know the answer. They just avoid thinking about it. Because once you admit it, you can't ignore it anymore. You can't pretend. You can't hide behind being busy. You have to change something, and change requires a new way of thinking. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop asking, what do I need to do today? Start asking, what can I build today that will remove work tomorrow? That one question changes everything. Because now, you're not just working, you're designing. You're not reacting, you're constructing. You're not maintaining, you're evolving. And this is where discipline comes in. Not the kind of discipline most people talk about. Not just waking up early or pushing through discomfort, but the discipline to think long-term. When short-term pressure is screaming at you, because building systems requires patience. It requires you to delay gratification. It requires you to accept that today might feel slower, so tomorrow can move faster. And most people don't make that trade. They choose immediate progress, immediate results, immediate validation, even if it costs them long-term freedom. Let me give you a line to carry with you. If your effort disappears when you stop, you didn't build progress. You rented it, and rented progress always expires. So what do you do now? You start small. You don't try to fix everything overnight. You look at one part of your business and you ask, can this be simplified? Can this be automated? Can this be turned into a repeatable system? One piece at a time, one layer at a time. Because systems are not built in one day. They're built through awareness, through intention, through consistent redesign. And as you do this, something powerful begins to happen. Your workload decreases, your clarity increases, your control expands, and slowly, you start to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Space, mental space, time, breathing room. That's the beginning of freedom, not the fantasy version, not the overnight success, but the real version, the one built quietly, through structure. Now in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper, because understanding the illusion of progress is one thing, but breaking free from it requires a new foundation, a way of thinking about business that most people never adopt. And once you see it, you'll realize something powerful. You don't need more effort. You need a different blueprint. Chapter 4, the blueprint. Most people never see. Most people don't fail because they lack effort. They fail because they're following the wrong blueprint, or worse, they're not following any blueprint at all. They're improvising, reacting, building based on urgency instead of structure. And when you build like that, you don't create a business. You create a fragile system that depends on constant attention. Let's slow this down, because this is where things shift from awareness to transformation. There are only two ways to build anything. You either build by intention or you build by reaction. And most people build by reaction. A client messages, you respond. A problem appears, you fix it. Something breaks, you repair it. Day after day, decision after decision. Without realizing, you are designing your business through chaos. And chaos always demands your presence. But intentional builders, they do something different. They pause, they observe, they design before they act. They ask questions most people don't ask. Questions like, what should this look like when it runs perfectly? What steps are repeatable? What parts can be removed? What parts can be standardized? They don't just solve problems, they redesign the system so the problem doesn't return. This is the blueprint shift. From solving to designing, from reacting to structuring, from temporary fixes to permanent solutions. Now here's where most people resist, because this way of thinking feels slower. It feels like you're not doing enough. While others are working fast, you're sitting there thinking, planning, mapping things out, and your mind starts to whisper, you're falling behind. But you're not. You're building differently. There's a powerful idea hidden in many entrepreneurial journeys. Those who build systems early feel slower at the beginning, but unstoppable later. And those who rush early eventually hit a ceiling they can't break, because speed without structure creates limits. Let's make this real. Imagine building a house. One person starts laying bricks immediately. No plan, no structure, just speed. Another person spends time designing, measuring, planning every detail. At first, the second person looks slower, less productive. But over time, the difference becomes obvious. One house stands strong. The other collapses under its own weight. Your business is the same. Every decision you make is either strengthening your structure or weakening it. And the scary part? Weak structures don't fail immediately. They fail later. When there's more pressure, more complexity, more responsibility, that's when everything breaks. So, what does a real blueprint look like? It's not complicated, but it requires clarity. It starts with this. Every part of your business must be defined, not in your head, but in a way that can be repeated. If someone asked you, how do you deliver your service? Could you explain it step by step without thinking? Or would you say, it depends, because it depends is where dependency lives. And dependency is what you're trying to eliminate. A real blueprint removes uncertainty. It turns guesswork into process. It turns creativity into structure. It turns effort into system. Let's go deeper. Every business, no matter how simple, has core components. And if you want it to run without you, each one must be systemized. These components are attraction, conversion, delivery, retention, how people find you, how they decide to buy, how you deliver value, how you keep them. Most people mix these together. They handle everything manually, randomly. But architects separate them, define them, optimize them. They ask, how can people find me without me being present? How can people buy without me convincing them? How can I deliver without doing it manually? How can customers return without me chasing them? Each question leads to a system, and each system removes you from the equation. This is where modern tools come in. Automation, digital platforms, AI, not as shortcuts, but as leverage, as multipliers, as silent workers that don't need rest, don't need supervision, don't need motivation. But here's the truth. Tools don't fix broken thinking. If your mindset is still reactive, you'll use tools reactively. If your mindset is structured, you'll build systems with them. So before you chase tools, you need clarity. You need a blueprint. You need to understand what you're building and why. Let me give you a line to carry forward. Clarity builds systems. Confusion builds dependency. And if your business feels overwhelming, it's not because it's too big. It's because it's not clearly structured. Now pause for a moment. Think about your current setup. Where are you unclear? Where are things messy? Where are you relying on memory instead of process? That's where your next breakthrough is hiding. Because once you bring clarity, everything changes. Tasks become systems. Stress becomes structure. Chaos becomes control. And slowly, you start stepping out of the center. You stop being the one everything depends on. You become something else, something more powerful. You become the designer. In the next chapter, we're going to break down something that holds people back even when they understand everything you've just heard. Something emotional, something internal, something that has nothing to do with strategy, but everything to do with control. Because building a business that runs without you requires letting go. And most people don't realize how hard that really is. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city, or at least which country, you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 5. The Fear of Letting Go. There is a moment that every builder eventually faces. A quiet realization. You understand systems. You understand structure. You understand what needs to be done, but something inside you resists. Not logically, emotionally, because building a business that runs without you means stepping away from being needed. And that is harder than it sounds. Let's be honest. Part of you likes being the one everything depends on. You like being the solution. You like being the fixer. You like knowing that without you, things wouldn't move. It gives you identity. It gives you control. It gives you a sense of importance. And there's nothing wrong with that until it becomes the reason you stay stuck. Because here's the truth most people avoid. If your identity is tied to being needed, you will unconsciously build a business that always needs you. Let that sink in. You won't even realize you're doing it. You'll say you want freedom, but you'll design systems that keep you involved. You'll say you want scalability, but you'll hold on to control. You'll say you want peace, but you'll stay in the center of everything. This is not a strategy problem. This is an internal conflict, a tension between who you are and who you need to become. The worker identity says, if I don't do it, it won't be done right. The manager says, I need to oversee everything to make sure it works. But the architect says something different. The architect says, if it only works when I'm involved, it's not built correctly. That's a different level of thinking, and it requires trust. Not blind trust in people, not blind trust in tools, but trust in systems, trust in design, trust in structure. But here's where most people struggle. Letting go feels like risk. It feels like you're giving up control. It feels like things might break. And sometimes they will, at first. Because systems are not perfect on day one. They require testing, refinement, iteration. And during that process, there will be moments where things don't go as planned. And that's when your old identity tries to take over again. It whispers, just step in. Just fix it quickly. It's easier if you handle it. And if you listen, you go back to the center. You rebuild dependency. This is the cycle most people never break. They build systems, then abandon them at the first sign of imperfection, and return to control. But real builders understand something different. They expect imperfection. They embrace it because they know every flaw in the system is a chance to improve it, not a reason to abandon it. Let me give you a perspective shift. When something breaks, don't ask, how do I fix this right now? Ask, why did this require me to fix it at all? That question changes everything, because now you're not just solving the problem, you're removing the need for future intervention. This is where discipline becomes deeper. Not just doing what's hard, but resisting the urge to take shortcuts. Resisting the urge to step in, when stepping back would create something better long term. And this is where most people fail. Not because they can't build systems, but because they can't stay out of them. Let's connect this to something deeper. In many of the ideas we've explored, there's a recurring pattern. People talk about growth. They talk about success. They talk about building something meaningful. But when it comes time to change behavior, they hesitate. They fall back into comfort because comfort feels safe, even when it's limiting. Letting go is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront uncertainty. It forces you to trust something you can't fully control. It forces you to step away from constant validation. But that's where growth lives, not in control, in design. Now let's get practical. What does letting go actually look like? It doesn't mean disappearing overnight. It doesn't mean removing yourself completely. It means stepping back intentionally, gradually, strategically. You start by identifying tasks that don't require your unique thinking, repetitive actions, predictable processes, things that follow the same pattern every time. And instead of doing them, you document them, define them, systemize them. Then you test the system. You let it run. You observe, you refine, you improve. And each time you resist the urge to jump back in, you strengthen the system. You build independence. You create space. Over time, something powerful happens. You're no longer reacting. You're no longer overwhelmed. You're no longer needed for everything. And that can feel strange at first, almost uncomfortable, because you're not used to it. But then you start to feel something else: clarity, freedom, control at a higher level. You're no longer inside the machine. You're above it, designing it, improving it, expanding it. Let me give you a line to carry forward. Control is doing everything. Power is building something that works without you. And once you feel that shift, there's no going back. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to take everything you've learned so far and begin turning it into something tangible. Because understanding mindset is one thing, but building a business that runs without you requires structure, real structure. And we're about to break down the first layer of it, the foundation that everything else is built on. Chapter 6, the foundation of a self-running business. Every structure that stands the test of time is built on something you don't see. Not the surface, not the decoration, not the visible results. The foundation. And if that foundation is weak, it doesn't matter how fast you build on top of it, it will crack. Eventually, your business is no different. What you see right now, clients, sales, messages, tasks, that's not the business, that's the surface. The real business is the system underneath it. And if that system is not designed properly, you will always feel pressure, always feel overwhelmed, always feel needed. So let's build this the right way. Not fast, not flashy, but strong. The foundation of a business that runs without you is built on one principle. Everything must be defined before it can be delegated, automated, or removed. Let that settle in. Because most people skip this step. They try to automate chaos. They try to scale confusion. They try to delegate things they haven't even clarified themselves. And that always leads to failure. Clarity is the first layer. Without clarity, there is no system, only guesswork. So what needs to be clear? Everything, not in theory, in reality. Start with this. What exactly does your business do? Not the vague version, not the "we help people grow" version, the real version, the specific version. What problem do you solve? For who? How? In what sequence? With what outcome? If you can't answer that clearly, nothing else will work. Because systems require precision, not general ideas. Now go deeper. What happens when someone enters your business, step by step, from the first interaction to the final result? Most people don't know this. They think they do. But when you ask them to explain it, they hesitate. They jump around. They say, "It depends." And that's the problem, because anything that depends on you. Let's simplify this. Imagine your business is a machine, a simple machine, something that takes an input and produces an output. Input, a customer, a request, a need. Process, steps, actions, transformations. Output, a result, a solution, a delivered value. If that machine only works when you operate it manually, it's not a machine, it's a tool, and you are the operator. But if that machine can run with defined steps, clear processes, minimal intervention, then you have something powerful. You have a system. This is where you begin. Not with automation, not with tools, not with scaling, but with defining the machine. Let's make this practical. Take one part of your business, just one. Don't try to fix everything. Pick something simple, something repetitive, something you do often. Now break it down, step by step. What happens first? Then what? Then what? Until it's complete. Write it out, clearly, simply, without skipping steps, without assuming knowledge. This is your first system. It might feel basic, it might feel obvious. But this is how it starts. Because once something is defined, it can be improved, it can be optimized, it can be automated. But if it's not defined, it stays in your head. And anything in your head requires your presence. Let's connect this to something deeper. In many of the ideas we've explored, there's a consistent pattern. People want results, they want progress, they want change. But they avoid the process of building structure because structure feels slow. It feels repetitive. It feels like extra work. But structure is what creates freedom. Without it, you're just reacting every day. There's a powerful idea hidden in disciplined thinking, small, consistent actions. Build something bigger than effort alone. And systems are exactly that. Small decisions, repeated, structured, built over time. Now here's something important. Your first system will not be perfect. It will have gaps. It will have inefficiencies. It will need improvement. That's not failure, that's progress. Because now you have something to improve instead of something to guess. And this is where momentum begins. You define one system, then another, then another. Slowly, your business starts to shift from chaos to clarity, from reaction to structure, from dependency to independence. And the most important part, you start stepping out. Not completely, not suddenly, but gradually. Because now, things don't rely on memory, they rely on process. Let me give you a line to carry forward. If it's not written, it's not a system. If it's not a system, it depends on you. And dependency is what you're eliminating. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to take this foundation and build something even more powerful on top of it. Because defining systems is only the beginning. The real transformation happens when those systems start working for you without your constant involvement. And that's where automation enters the picture, but not the way most people think. Chapter 7. Automation is not what you think. Most people hear the word automation and immediately think of tools, software, AI, platforms, buttons that replace effort, and that's where they go wrong. Because automation is not about tools. Automation is about decisions. Let's slow this down, because if you misunderstand this, you will waste time. You will chase solutions that don't work. You will automate things that should never exist in the first place. Here's the truth. You don't automate tasks. You automate clarity. If something is unclear, automation amplifies the confusion. If something is broken, automation scales the problem. If something depends on your judgment, automation fails. This is why most people struggle with automation. They try to skip steps. They try to jump ahead. They try to replace effort without building structure first. But now you understand something different. You've seen the foundation. You've started defining systems. And that changes everything. Because once a process is clear, once it's repeatable, once it has a defined beginning, middle, and end, that's when automation becomes powerful. Let's go back to the machine idea: input, process, output. If the process is consistent, you can remove yourself from it, not by force, but by design. Now here's where it gets interesting, because in 2025, automation doesn't require a team. It doesn't require complex infrastructure. It doesn't require massive investment. It requires thinking. You can automate communication. You can automate delivery. You can automate onboarding. You can automate follow-ups. You can automate entire flows. That used to require constant attention, but only if you ask the right questions. Instead of asking, "What tool should I use?" ask, "What decision is being made here, and can that decision be predefined?" That's the shift, because most tasks are not actually tasks. They're decisions. For example, a customer asks a question. You respond manually. But why? Because the answer exists in your head. Now imagine this. What if that answer was documented, structured, predefined? Suddenly, it doesn't require you anymore. It becomes a system. And once it's a system, it can be automated. This applies to everything, not just communication, but delivery, processes, workflows, and this is where leverage begins. Let me give you a simple framework. If something happens more than once, it should become a system. If it becomes a system, it can be automated. If it's automated, it removes you from the equation. That's how you build freedom. Not by doing more, but by repeating less. Now here's something most people don't realize. Automation is not about removing effort completely. It's about relocating it. You put in effort once to design the system, to define the process, to set it up correctly, and in return, you remove effort permanently. This is the trade most people avoid because it requires patience. It requires discipline. It requires thinking long-term. But once you experience it, you never go back because suddenly things happen without you. Messages get answered, processes move forward, value gets delivered, and you didn't touch anything. That's not luck. That's structure. Let's connect this to something deeper. In many of the ideas we've explored, there's a recurring pattern. People talk about working harder, being more disciplined, pushing through. But real progress comes from working smarter, through systems, through leverage, through intentional design. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're still doing everything manually, it's not because it has to be done that way. It's because it hasn't been redesigned yet. Let that sit with you, because that realization is where responsibility returns. Not pressure, power. Now let's go practical again. Take one system you defined in the previous chapter, just one. Ask yourself, can this be triggered automatically? Can this be delivered without manual input? Can this follow a predefined path? If the answer is yes, then you're ready to automate. Start simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't try to build the perfect system. Build a working one, test it, refine it, improve it. Because automation is not a one-time action. It's a process, an evolution, a continuous improvement cycle. And each time you refine it, you remove more of yourself from the process. This is how businesses begin to run, without constant involvement, not because they're perfect, but because they're designed. Let me give you a line to carry forward. Automation is not about replacing you. It's about freeing you. And once you understand that, you stop chasing tools and start building systems. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further because automation alone is not enough. There's another layer, a deeper one that determines whether your business becomes stable or stays fragile. It's about predictability, about consistency, about creating something that doesn't just run, but runs reliably. And once you understand that, you'll unlock something even more powerful than automation. Chapter 8. Building predictability into your business. Automation gives you movement without effort, but predictability gives you stability without fear. And those are not the same thing. Because here's what most people don't realize. You can automate something and still feel overwhelmed. You can automate processes and still feel out of control. You can build systems and still feel like everything might break at any moment. Why? Because automation without predictability is just faster chaos. Let that land, because this is where the next level begins. A business that runs without you is not just automated, it's predictable. It behaves in a way you can trust. It produces outcomes you can expect. It operates within defined boundaries. And when that happens, something shifts inside you. You stop checking constantly. You stop worrying about every detail. You stop feeling like something might go wrong at any moment because you know how it works. And more importantly, you know what to expect. So how do you build predictability? It starts with one concept: standardization. Now don't confuse this with rigidity. Standardization doesn't mean everything is robotic. It means everything is consistent. Think about this. If the same input goes into your business, shouldn't the same output come out? If the answer is no, you don't have a system, you have variability. And variability creates uncertainty. Let's make this practical. Imagine two customers enter your business, same need, same request, but they get different experiences, different responses, different outcomes. That's not flexibility, that's inconsistency. And inconsistency breaks trust, not just for customers, for you. Because now you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how much effort it will require. You don't know how much attention it needs. That's exhausting. Predictability removes that. It creates a clear path, a defined experience, a repeatable result. And that's what allows you to step away. Let's go deeper. Standardization happens at every level. How you communicate, how you onboard, how you deliver, how you follow up. Each part must have a clear structure, a defined sequence, a consistent outcome. And here's where most people resist, because they think, but every situation is different. And yes, details may vary, but the structure should not, because structure creates control, and control creates freedom. Let's connect this to something deeper. There's a pattern we've seen across many successful systems. Consistency beats intensity every time. Not because intensity isn't powerful, but because consistency is sustainable. You don't need random bursts of effort. You need steady, predictable performance. And that only comes from structure. Now let's tie this back to your business. If your results feel random, if your workload feels unpredictable, if your days feel chaotic, It's not because your business is too complex. It's because it's not standardized. Let me give you a simple exercise. Pick one process, just one. Ask yourself, does this happen the same way every time? If the answer is no, that's where you start. Define it. Simplify it. Standardize it. Remove unnecessary variation. Remove unnecessary decisions. Create a clear path, because every decision you remove is one less thing that depends on you. And that's the goal. Let's go even deeper. Predictability is not just about processes, it's about outcomes. You need to know, what result does this system produce, and can that result be replicated consistently? If not, the system needs refinement. And this is where patience becomes critical, because predictability is built over time, through testing, through iteration, through improvement. You don't get it perfect on day one, but you move toward it, step by step, and each step reduces uncertainty. Let me give you a line to carry forward. A system you can't predict is a system you can't trust. And if you can't trust it, you won't step away from it. Now pause for a moment. Think about your current business. Where does unpredictability exist? Where do things feel random? Where do outcomes change unexpectedly? That's where your attention goes next. Because once you eliminate unpredictability, you create stability. And stability is what allows growth without stress. Now here's where things get powerful. Because once your systems are predictable, you can start scaling them, expanding them, multiplying them, without increasing your involvement. That's the real goal. Not just to build something that works, but to build something that works reliably. Because reliability creates confidence, and confidence creates freedom. Now in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further, because there's one final layer that determines whether your business truly runs without you, or still depends on your presence in subtle ways. It's not about systems. It's not about automation. It's something deeper, something most people ignore. And once you understand it, you'll see why some businesses run smoothly, while others constantly need attention. We'd also like to remind you that we have a private members community on our channel. All members can vote on the topic of the next video, have priority in the comment section, and most importantly, gain access to exclusive videos and lessons covering the most relevant topics and information specific to this month. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. Chapter 9. The Invisible Bottleneck. There's one final layer that most people never see, not because it's hidden, but because it looks like responsibility. You've built systems, you've defined processes, you've introduced automation, you've created predictability, and yet something still pulls you back in. Not always, not constantly, but just enough to remind you that you're still involved. This is the invisible bottleneck, and it lives in one place: decision-making. Let's slow this down, because this is where most self-running businesses quietly fail. You remove tasks, you remove repetition, you remove manual work, but decisions still come to you. Should we do this? Is this correct? What happens in this situation? Can we make an exception? And suddenly, even though you're not doing the work, you're still controlling the flow. That's the bottleneck. Not effort, not time, but decisions. Because every time something requires your judgment, the system pauses, waits, depends. And that dependency breaks independence. Let me say it clearly. A business cannot run without you if it still needs your decisions. This is the level most people never reach. They automate tasks, but they keep control over thinking. And it feels right, because decisions feel important. They feel like leadership. They feel like responsibility. But if every decision flows through you, you are still the system. So how do you fix this? You don't remove decisions. You define them. This is where systems become truly powerful. Not when they execute, but when they decide. Let's break this down. Every decision in your business follows a pattern, even if it feels unique, even if it feels complex, even if it feels like it depends. There is always a pattern. For example, a customer asks for a refund. You decide based on context. But what if that decision was already defined? If X happens, do Y. If A happens, do B. Suddenly, no decision is needed, only execution. This is how you remove yourself from thinking, not by ignoring decisions, but by structuring them in advance. This is called decision frameworks, and it changes everything. Instead of reacting in the moment, you design responses ahead of time. Instead of thinking under pressure, you define logic in clarity. Instead of being the bottleneck, you become the architect of decisions. Now here's where it gets deeper. Because not all decisions should be removed. Some require judgment, creativity, adaptation. But here's the truth. Most decisions in your business are repetitive. They feel unique, but they follow patterns. And once you identify those patterns, you can define them. This is where freedom expands, because now it's not just tasks that run without you. It's thinking. Let's connect this to something deeper. In many of the ideas we've explored, there's a recurring theme. People stay stuck not because they lack tools, but because they don't redefine how they think. They stay involved. They stay reactive. They stay central because they never step back far enough to see the patterns. But once you see them, you can design around them. And that's where the real shift happens. Let me give you a simple exercise. Think about the last 10 decisions you made in your business. Write them down, one by one. Now ask yourself, have I made this decision before? If the answer is yes, it can be defined. If it can be defined, it can be systemized. If it can be systemized, it can run without you. That's the chain. And once you start doing this, something powerful happens. Fewer things come to you, fewer interruptions, fewer moments where you're needed. And over time, you move further away from the center, not because you're absent, but because the system is complete. Let me give you a line to carry forward. If your business needs your decisions to move forward, it still depends on your presence. And your goal is independence. Now here's where things start to shift dramatically. Because once decisions are defined, once systems are predictable, once automation is in place, you reach a new level. A level where your business doesn't just run, it scales without adding more of you. And that's what we're going to break down next. Because scaling without structure creates chaos. But scaling with systems creates freedom at a level most people never experience. And once you understand that, you'll realize something powerful. You don't need more time. You don't need more effort. You don't need more control. You need better design. And that's where we're going next. Chapter 10. Scaling without becoming the bottleneck again. There's a dangerous moment in every business, a moment that looks like success, feels like growth, but quietly reintroduces everything you just escaped. It happens when things start working, when systems begin to run, when automation kicks in. when predictability starts to stabilize your operations. And then you decide to grow. More customers, more sales, more reach, more opportunity. And on the surface, that's the goal. That's what you wanted. That's what you've been building toward. But here's the truth most people never prepare for. If you scale a system that still depends on you, you don't grow freedom, you grow pressure. Let that sit with you, because scaling doesn't fix problems. It multiplies them. If your structure is weak, scaling exposes it. If your systems are incomplete, scaling breaks them. If your business still depends on your attention, scaling overwhelms you. That's why so many people reach a point where growth becomes stressful, not exciting, not liberating, but heavy, because they didn't scale systems, they scaled effort. Now here's the shift. Scaling the right way is not about doing more. It's about duplicating what already works. Let's go back to the machine. You've built it, defined it, refined it. Now the question becomes, can this machine handle more input without changing the process? If the answer is yes, you're ready to scale. If the answer is no, you're not scaling, you're stretching. And stretching always leads to breaking. This is where discipline becomes strategic, because instead of chasing growth immediately, you pause, you evaluate, you test. You ask, can this system handle double the volume without requiring double the effort? If not, you refine it before you expand it. This is what separates real builders from reactive operators. Operators chase growth. Builders prepare for it. Let's make this practical. You have a system that delivers value. Right now, it works, but only at a certain capacity. Instead of pushing more through it, you improve it. You remove friction. You simplify steps. You strengthen weak points until it can handle more without more of you. That's scalability. Now here's where it gets powerful, because once a system is scalable, it becomes leverage. It doesn't just produce results, it multiplies them. And this is where modern business changes everything. Because you don't need employees to scale. You need systems, digital systems, automated flows, structured processes, things that don't get tired, don't lose focus, don't require constant oversight. And when those systems are strong, scaling becomes simple, not easy, but simple. You increase input, the system handles it. Output increases without increasing your involvement. That's the goal. Let's connect this to something deeper. There's a pattern we've seen again and again. People think growth requires more effort, more time, more sacrifice. But real growth requires better structure, because effort has limits, but systems don't. Let me give you a line to carry forward. If growth requires more of you, it's not scaling, it's stretching. And stretching always leads to burnout. Now pause for a moment. Look at your current setup. If you had 10 times more customers tomorrow, what would happen? Would your systems handle it? Or would everything collapse? That answer tells you exactly where you stand, and it shows you exactly what to fix next. Because scaling is not something you do later. It's something you prepare for now. You build with it in mind. You design for it. You structure for it, so when the opportunity comes, you're ready. Not overwhelmed, not reactive, not scrambling to keep up, but stable, controlled, prepared. And this is where the real shift happens. Because once your business can scale, without you, you reach a new level. A level where your time is no longer tied to your income, where your presence is no longer required for progress, where your role changes completely. You're no longer building to survive. You're building to expand. And in the next chapter, we're going to explore that shift, because once your business runs and scales without you, you become something different. Not the worker, not the manager, not even just the architect. Something more. And that's where real freedom begins. Chapter 11. Becoming the owner, not the operator. There comes a point when everything you've been building finally starts to work. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but independently. Systems are running. Decisions are predefined. Processes are predictable. Automation is handling flow. And for the first time, you feel something unfamiliar. Silence. No constant notifications, no urgent interruptions, no pressure pulling you back in. And in that silence, you realize something powerful. You are no longer operating the business. But here's where most people get lost, because they don't know what to do next. They spent so much time being needed that when they're no longer needed, they feel uncertain. They ask, what's my role now? What should I be doing? Where do I focus? And this is where the final identity shift begins, because you are no longer the worker. You are no longer the manager. You are no longer even just the architect. You are the owner. And that is a completely different mindset. The worker asks, what needs to be done today? The manager asks, how do I keep things running smoothly? The architect asks, how do I design this to work without me? But the owner asks something else entirely. Where should this go next? That's it. Not how to do it, not how to manage it, not how to fix it, but where to take it. Because once your business runs without you, your job is no longer execution, it's direction. This is where true freedom begins. Not just time freedom, but mental freedom. You're no longer trapped in the day-to-day. You're no longer reacting to every detail. You're no longer tied to constant output. You're thinking, expanding, creating at a higher level. But here's the challenge, and it's subtle. If you're not careful, you will fall back into old patterns. You'll jump into tasks just to help. You'll start managing again just to stay involved. You'll take back control just to make sure. And slowly, you'll rebuild the very dependency you escaped. This is why awareness matters, because your old identity doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits for moments of uncertainty, moments where stepping back feels uncomfortable, moments where control feels safer than trust. And if you're not intentional, you go back. But real owners stay out, not because they don't care, but because they understand something deeper. Their value is no longer in doing, it's in deciding direction. Let's connect this to something bigger. In many of the ideas we've explored, there's a consistent truth. People stay stuck because they never redefine their role. They build systems, but still act like operators. They create freedom, but don't know how to live in it. And that's why they return to busyness, because busyness feels familiar, but ownership feels different. It requires vision, clarity, long-term thinking. It requires you to zoom out, to see the bigger picture, to ask better questions. Questions like, what markets should I enter next? What systems can be improved further? What opportunities exist that I'm not seeing? What direction creates the most leverage? These are not daily questions. They are strategic questions. And they change everything. Because now, you're not working inside the business. You're working on its future. Let me give you a line to carry forward. Operators focus on tasks. Owners focus on direction. And once you fully step into that role, your entire relationship with business changes. You're no longer chasing income. You're building assets. You're no longer reacting to problems. You're creating opportunities. You're no longer tied to effort. You're leveraging systems. And that's where real expansion begins. Now, here's where things get even more interesting, because once you operate at this level, you start to see something clearly. You don't need just one system. You can build multiple, not by working harder, but by applying the same principles. And that's what we're going to explore next. Because building one self-running business is powerful. But understanding how to replicate that process is where things become exponential. And once you see that, you'll realize something that changes everything. You're not just building a business anymore. You're building a framework for creating them. And that's where true leverage begins. Chapter 12, Replication, Turning One System into Many. There's a moment when something clicks, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. You realize something most people never do. The process you used to build this can be used again. And that realization is where everything becomes exponential. Because up until now, you've been focused on building one system, one business, one structure that runs without you. And that alone puts you ahead of most people. But now, you're seeing something deeper. You didn't just build a business, you built a model, a repeatable way of thinking, a framework, a process. And once something becomes repeatable, it becomes scalable in a completely different way. Let's slow this down, because this is where people either expand or stay limited. Most people build one business and stop there, not because they want to, but because they're exhausted, because that one business took everything from them. But your situation is different, because your business doesn't depend on you, which means you have something most people don't: capacity, mental capacity, time capacity, energy capacity. And capacity is what allows expansion. But here's the mistake most people make at this stage. They try to build something completely new, from scratch. Different model, different structure, different approach, and they lose everything they built. Because they forget something simple. You don't need to reinvent. You need to replicate. Let that sink in. You already know how to build a system. You already understand structure. You already know how to remove yourself. So why start from zero? Instead, you duplicate what works. You take the same principles, the same framework, the same structure, and you apply it again. Maybe in a different niche, maybe with a different offer, maybe targeting a different audience. But the core remains the same. Systemized attraction, systemized conversion, systemized delivery, systemized retention, defined processes, automated flows, predictable outcomes. This is how real builders expand, not by chasing ideas, but by duplicating systems. Let's connect this to something deeper. There's a pattern across high-level thinking. People who succeed at scale don't rely on creativity alone. They rely on frameworks. Because creativity is unpredictable, frameworks are repeatable. And repeatability is what creates leverage. Now here's where discipline comes in again. Because just because you can build more doesn't mean you should rush. Expansion without intention creates complexity. And complexity is the enemy of systems. So instead of asking, how many businesses can I build? Ask, how can I replicate this system cleanly, without adding unnecessary complexity? That question keeps you grounded, focused, strategic, because the goal is not more. The goal is better. Better systems, better structure, better leverage, and as you build, you start to notice something. Each system becomes easier. Each build becomes faster. Each structure becomes clearer because you're not guessing anymore. You're applying. This is the power of experience. Not just knowing, but understanding. Let me give you a line to carry forward. The first system takes effort. The second takes awareness. The third takes mastery. And once you reach that third level, everything changes. Because now, you're not building businesses, you're building assets. Things that operate independently. Things that generate value. Things that exist beyond your time. And this is where financial freedom begins to take shape. Not as a dream, but as a structure, multiple systems, running, producing, operating without constant input, and you at the center of none of them, only directing, only deciding, only expanding. Now pause for a moment. Think about what that really means. No constant pressure, no dependency on daily effort, no need to trade time for income, just systems, working, quietly, consistently. This is not theory, this is structure, and once you experience it, you don't go back. But here's the final layer, the one most people never fully understand, because building systems, replicating them, scaling them, is only part of the equation. The other part is you, your mindset, your discipline, your ability to stay aligned. Because without that, even the best systems can collapse. And in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into that. Not the external structure, but the internal one. Because the business can only run without you, if you don't unconsciously pull yourself back into it. And that is where the final transformation happens. Dear friend, you are definitely on the right track if you are watching this video. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which topic or problem concerns you the most. We promise to prepare a professional video explanation at your request. Chapter 13. The internal discipline that protects your freedom. There's something no one tells you about building a business that runs without you. It's not the systems that are hardest to build. It's not the automation. It's not the structure. It's not even the strategy. It's you. Because once everything is working, once your business runs without constant effort, once your time opens up, you face something unexpected. Space, and space can be dangerous. Not because it's bad, but because most people don't know how to handle it. They've spent years being busy, years being needed, years operating under pressure, and suddenly that pressure is gone. No constant urgency, no endless tasks, no daily firefighting, just silence. And in that silence, something happens. Your mind starts searching for something to do, something to fix, something to control. And if you're not aware, you'll go back into the business, back into tasks, back into control. Not because you have to, but because it feels familiar. This is the final trap, the one that catches people after they've already built what they wanted. They recreate dependency without realizing it, because they haven't mastered the internal discipline of staying out. Let me say this clearly. Building a business that runs without you means learning how to not interfere with it. That's a different level of discipline. It's not about pushing harder. It's not about doing more. It's about restraint. Resisting the urge to jump in. Resisting the urge to control everything. Resisting the urge to fill every moment with activity. because not all action creates progress, and not all involvement creates value. Let's connect this to something deeper. In many of the ideas we've explored, there's a consistent truth. People struggle not because they lack knowledge, but because they lack control over themselves. They react, they drift, they fall back into old patterns. And this applies here because your old identity, the worker, the manager, is still inside you. And if you don't consciously choose to operate as the owner, you will default back. This is why internal discipline matters, not just in building, but in maintaining what you've built. So what does this discipline look like? It starts with awareness, catching yourself. When you feel the urge to step in unnecessarily, asking, is this actually required, or am I just uncomfortable being out of control? That question creates space. It forces you to pause, to think, to choose intentionally. Then comes structure. You don't just remove yourself, you replace your role. Instead of daily tasks, you create strategic time. Time to think, time to evaluate, time to improve systems, time to explore new opportunities. Because if you don't fill your time with intention, you'll fill it with reaction. And reaction leads back to chaos. This is where many people fail. They build freedom, but don't know how to live in it. So they go back to what they know, busyness, because busyness feels productive, even when it's not. Let me give you a line to carry forward. If you don't control your role, your habits will choose it for you. And your habits are built from your past, not your future. So you must be intentional. Now here's something important. This doesn't mean you never engage. It doesn't mean you disappear completely. It means you engage at the right level. You step in when it creates leverage, when it improves systems, when it moves the business forward structurally, not when it just solves a temporary problem, because solving temporary problems is what keeps you stuck. Designing permanent solutions is what keeps you free. Let's go deeper. There will be moments where things go wrong, systems break, processes fail, unexpected situations arise, and your instinct will be to jump in immediately. But instead, you pause, you observe, you analyze, and then you ask, what system allowed this to happen? Because the goal is not to fix the moment, it's to prevent the pattern. That's how owners think, and that's how businesses stay independent. Now here's where it becomes powerful, because once you master this, you don't just build one self-running system. You maintain it, you protect it, you strengthen it over time, and that creates something rare, stability, not fragile success, not temporary growth, but something that lasts, something that operates quietly, without constant attention. And that's where real freedom lives, not in doing less, but in needing less. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to take everything you've built and connect it to something even bigger. Because once your business runs without you, and once you have the discipline to stay out, you unlock something most people never experience: choice. And that changes everything, because now you don't just have a business, you have options. And in the next chapter, we're going to explore what that really means. Chapter 14, The Power of Having a Choice. There's a level most people never reach, not because it's impossible, not because it's reserved for a few, but because they never build the foundation required to get there. It's not about money, it's not about status, it's not even about success in the traditional sense. It's about choice. The ability to decide how you spend your time, where you direct your energy, what you build next, and what you walk away from. And most people never experience that because their time is owned by their job, by their responsibilities, by the systems they never built. Even in business, many people are still trapped. They just built a more demanding job, one that follows them everywhere. But you chose a different path. You built something that runs. You removed yourself from the center. You created systems that operate independently. And now you have something rare, space, and inside that space lives choice. But here's the truth. Having a choice and using it correctly are two very different things. Because once you have freedom, you face a new challenge. What do you do with it? Most people think freedom means doing nothing, resting, relaxing, stepping away completely. And for a moment, that feels right. After everything you've built, after the pressure, after the effort, you deserve that. But here's where it gets deeper. If you stay in that space too long, without direction, without intention, you begin to drift, because humans are not designed to exist without purpose. And this is where many people lose momentum. They build freedom, but lose direction. They escape pressure, but lose drive. And slowly, they fall into comfort. And comfort, when it becomes permanent, turns into stagnation. This is why choice must be paired with clarity. Not just, I can do anything, but what is worth doing? That's a different question, a deeper one, because now you're not reacting to life, you're designing it, and that requires intention. Let's connect this to something deeper. In many of the ideas we've explored, there's a consistent theme. People don't fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because they lack direction. They move, they act, they stay busy. But without clarity, they go nowhere. And now, you're in a position where direction matters more than ever, because your systems are running, your business is stable, your time is available. So the question becomes, where do you focus next? This is where ownership reaches its highest level, not just owning a business, but owning your life, designing it intentionally, choosing what matters, choosing what aligns, choosing what creates meaning. Because now, you're not forced into anything, you're choosing, and that changes everything. Let me give you a line to carry forward. Freedom is not having nothing to do. It's choosing what matters most. Now let's make this practical. There are 3 directions most people take at this stage. The first is expansion. They build more systems, more businesses, more assets. They replicate what works, scale what's proven, and this can be powerful. But only if it's intentional, because more does not always mean better. The second is optimization. They refine what already exists, improve systems, increase efficiency, strengthen structure. They focus on quality, not quantity. And this creates depth, stability, long-term growth. The third is redirection. They explore new areas, new interests, new challenges, not because they have to, but because they choose to. And this creates fulfillment. Now here's the key. There's no single right path, but there is a right decision for you. And that decision comes from clarity. Not pressure, not urgency, not external expectations, but internal alignment. Because at this level, you're no longer building for survival. You're building for purpose. And that requires a different mindset, a slower one, a more intentional one that values direction over speed. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what do I actually want next? Not what sounds impressive, not what others expect, but what feels right, because now you have the ability to pursue it without sacrificing your time, without losing your freedom. That's the power of what you've built, and that's what most people never reach. But here's the final truth. Choice is not the end. It's the beginning. Because what you choose next defines everything that follows. And in the next chapter, we're going to bring everything together, not just the systems, not just the structure, not just the mindset, but the full picture, the complete framework for building a business that truly runs without you. And once you see it clearly, you'll understand something powerful. You were never meant to be the center of the business. You were meant to build something that stands on its own. And now, you're ready to see exactly how it all connects. Chapter 15, The Complete Framework, How It All Connects. Now, it's time to step back, not slightly, completely. Because up until now, you've been moving through layers, understanding pieces, building parts, shifting your mindset step by step. But real clarity comes when you see the whole picture, not fragments, not isolated ideas, but the full structure. Because a business that runs without you is not one decision. It's not one system. It's not one breakthrough. It's a sequence, a framework, a way of thinking, applied consistently. And once you see it all together, something clicks. You stop guessing. You stop overthinking. You stop feeling like you're missing something. Because now, you understand how everything connects. Let's walk through it. Slowly, clearly. The first layer was awareness. You realize something most people avoid, that being busy is not the same as building something that lasts. You saw the trap, the constant work, the endless involvement, the illusion of progress, and that awareness was the beginning. Because you cannot change what you don't see. The second layer was identity. You discovered the three roles, the worker, the manager, the architect, and you understood something powerful, that your business reflects the identity you operate from. If you stay a worker, you stay trapped. If you stay a manager, you stay involved. If you become an architect, you build systems. That shift changed how you think. The third layer was structure. You stopped reacting. You started defining. You broke your business into parts, clarified processes, created repeatable systems. Because without structure, there is no freedom, only chaos. The fourth layer was automation, not as a shortcut, not as a tool, but as a result of clarity. You learned that automation is not about replacing effort, but relocating it. You invest effort once to remove it permanently, and that creates leverage. The fifth layer was predictability. You removed randomness. You created consistency. You standardized outcomes, because a system you can't predict is a system you can't trust. And without trust, you can't step away. The sixth layer was decision-making. You identified the invisible bottleneck, not tasks, not effort, but decisions. And you learned how to define them, structure them, remove dependency from thinking. Because a business that depends on your decisions still depends on you. The seventh layer was scalability. You stopped chasing growth blindly. You prepared for it. You built systems that could handle more without requiring more of you. Because real scaling multiplies results without multiplying effort. The eighth layer was ownership. You stepped out of operations, out of management, out of constant involvement, and into direction. You stopped asking, "What do I do today?" and started asking, "Where do I take this next?" The ninth layer was replication. You realize that what you built could be built again, not from scratch, but from structure. You turned one system into a framework, and that created exponential potential. The 10th layer was internal discipline, because none of this works if you keep stepping back in. You learn to resist, to observe, to maintain your role, because freedom is not just built, it's protected. And finally, the 11th layer was choice. The ability to decide what matters, what to build next, what direction to take, not from pressure, but from intention. Now look at that. That's not random. That's not luck. That's a system for building systems. And once you understand it, you can apply it anywhere, any industry, any model, any opportunity, because the principles don't change. Let me give you the most important line of this entire audiobook. You don't build a business to work in it. You build a system that works without you. Everything you've learned connects back to that. Every decision, every structure, every shift, it all leads here. Now pause for a moment. Think about where you started, the pressure, the constant work, the feeling of being stuck, and compare it to where you are now. Clarity, structure, control at a higher level, that's transformation, not overnight, not magically, but intentionally. Now here's the final step, because understanding this framework is not the end, it's the beginning. Because knowledge without action changes nothing. So ask yourself, what is the first system I need to build? Not everything, not the whole business, just the first step. Because every system starts with one decision, one definition, one process. And from there, everything builds. Now in the next chapter, we're going to bring this journey to its conclusion, not with theory, not with structure, but with something deeper, a final perspective that will stay with you long after this audiobook ends. Because building a business that runs without you is not just about business. It's about how you choose to live, and that is what we're about to close with. Chapter 16. This was never just about business. At the beginning of this journey, you thought this was about building something external, a business, a system, a source of income. But now, you can see it more clearly. This was never just about business. It was about control. Not control over others, but control over your time, your attention, your energy. Because that's what a business that runs without you really gives you. Not just money, not just flexibility, but ownership of your life. Think about that. Most people spend their entire lives trading time for stability, trading energy for security, trading presence for survival. And they accept it, not because they want to, but because they don't see another way. But you chose differently. You stepped back. You questioned the structure. You refused to build something that trapped you. And that decision changed everything. Because once you realize that you don't have to be the center of everything, you start building differently. You stop chasing activity. You start designing outcomes. You stop reacting to demands. You start creating systems. You stop being needed and start being free. And that freedom is deeper than most people understand. Because it's not just external, it's internal. You're no longer rushing, no longer overwhelmed, no longer pulled in every direction. You're steady, clear, intentional, and that changes how you live. Let's connect this to something deeper. There's a pattern across everything we've explored. People don't struggle because life is unfair. They struggle Because they never take full ownership of how they build it. They follow default paths, default structures, default expectations, and they end up in lives they never consciously designed. But you did something different. You took ownership, not just of your business, but of your approach, your thinking, your structure. And that's why this works. Let me give you a line to carry forward. The way you build your business is the way you build your life. If your business is chaotic, your life feels chaotic. If your business depends on constant effort, your life feels heavy. But if your business is structured, predictable, independent, your life becomes the same. Calm, clear, controlled, and that's the real goal, not just to escape work, but to create alignment, where your external systems support your internal state. Now here's something important. This doesn't mean you stop growing. It doesn't mean you stop building. It doesn't mean you stop challenging yourself. It means you choose differently. You build from intention, not pressure. You expand from clarity, not urgency. You create from purpose, not necessity. And that changes everything, because now you're not building to survive. You're building to express, to create something meaningful, something aligned, something that reflects who you've become. And that's where real fulfillment lives, not in endless growth, not in constant expansion, but in alignment, where what you build matches how you want to live. Now pause for a moment. Think about your life before this, the pressure, the noise, the constant movement, and compare it to what's possible now. Structure, clarity, freedom. That's not just business growth, that's personal transformation. And it came from one decision: to stop building randomly and start building intentionally. That's it. Now here's where we begin to close this journey. But before we do, there's one more layer, one final perspective. Because even with everything you've learned, there's a question that remains. A simple one, but a powerful one. What will you do with this? Because knowledge alone does not change your life. Action does. And in the final chapter, we're going to bring everything together with one last message, one that will stay with you long after this audiobook ends, one that will remind you of what truly matters and what comes next. Chapter 17, The Final Shift from Knowing to Becoming. There is a difference between hearing something powerful and becoming someone powerful. You've listened, you've understood, you've followed the journey from pressure to clarity, from chaos to structure, from dependency to freedom. But now you stand at a different kind of moment, not a learning moment, a decision moment, because everything you've heard only matters if it becomes real. Let's be honest, most people listen to things like this, feel inspired, feel motivated, and then go back to the same patterns. Not because they don't care, not because they don't want change, but because change requires action. And action requires discomfort. And most people avoid discomfort. But you already know something different. You know that growth lives in the uncomfortable decisions. The decision to stop reacting. The decision to build systems. The decision to step out of the center. The decision to think long-term. And now, there's one more decision. The decision to begin. Not perfectly, not completely, but intentionally. Because here's the truth. You don't build a self-running business all at once. You build it one system at a time, one process, one structure, one improvement. And over time, those pieces connect, just like they did in this audiobook. Now let's bring this into reality. Think about your current situation. Where are you still the bottleneck? Where are you still doing things manually? Where are you still reacting instead of designing? That's your starting point. Not everything, just one area. Because progress doesn't require everything to change. It requires something to change. And that something is where you begin. Let's connect this to something deeper. In many of the ideas we explored earlier, there was a recurring truth. People don't get what they want because they don't take ownership of what they build. They wait, they delay, they hesitate, but nothing changes until they decide to move. And that's where you are now, at the edge of action. You can go back to comfort, back to familiarity, back to the same patterns, or you can move forward into structure, into clarity, into freedom. And the difference between those two paths is one decision. Let me give you a line to carry forward. Your future is not built by what you know. It's built by what you implement. So here's what you do next. Not tomorrow. Not when things calm down. Now. You choose one system. You define it. Step by step. You remove confusion. You create clarity. Then you refine it. Then you automate it. Then you step away from it. And once that works, you repeat. That's it. Not complicated, not overwhelming, but powerful. Because consistency builds everything. Now here's something important. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. You don't need perfect conditions. You need commitment. Commitment to building something real, something structured, something that lasts. Because once you commit, everything else follows. Clarity improves, systems develop, confidence grows, and over time, you become the person who builds differently, not reactive, not overwhelmed, but intentional. That's the real transformation. Not just changing your business, but changing how you think, how you act, how you build. Because once that changes, everything changes. Now, in the next chapter, we bring this journey to its final moment, not with more strategies, not with more frameworks, but with something that stays with you, a final message, a final perspective, one that reminds you why this matters and what kind of life you are now capable of building. Chapter 18, the life you were actually trying to build. At the very beginning, you thought you wanted a business, more income, more flexibility, more control over your schedule, and that made sense because that's what most people chase. But now, after everything you've seen, after everything you've understood, you can see it more clearly. It was never just about the business. It was about the life behind it. The quiet mornings, without urgency pulling you out of bed. The ability to step away, without everything falling apart. The freedom to think, without constant noise in your head. The space to choose what actually matters to you. That's what you were building, even if you didn't have the words for it at the time. And now, you do, because you've seen the difference between working inside something and owning something, between reacting to life and designing it, between being needed and being free. Let that sink in, because most people never experience this. They stay in motion, stay busy, stay trapped in cycles they don't question, and they call it normal. But you stepped out of that. You questioned the structure, you changed the approach, you built something different, and that difference changes everything. Let's go deeper. There's a quiet power in knowing that things are working even when you're not. Not because you're lucky, not because someone is helping you constantly, but because you built it that way. That confidence is different. It's not loud, it's not external, it's internal. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to show anything because you know. You know how it works. You know how it's built. You know it doesn't depend on you anymore, and that knowledge creates peace, real peace, not the temporary kind, not the I'll rest when things calm down kind, but the kind that comes from structure, from control at the right level. And this is where life begins to feel different, not rushed, not chaotic, not overwhelming, but intentional. You choose your pace, you choose your focus, you choose your direction, and that is what most people are really searching for. Not more work, not more pressure, but more control over how they live. Let me give you a line to carry with you. The goal was never to escape work. The goal was to escape dependence. Because work itself is not the problem. The problem is when your entire life depends on it. When you can't step away, when you can't pause, when everything stops if you stop. That's the trap, and you broke it. Now here's something important. This doesn't mean life becomes perfect. It doesn't mean challenges disappear, but it changes how you face them. You're no longer reacting from pressure. You're responding from clarity. You're no longer overwhelmed by every detail. You're focused on what actually matters. And that's a different level of living. Now pause for a moment. Imagine your life 1 year from now if you fully apply everything you've learned. Systems running, decisions predefined, structure in place, freedom in your schedule. What does that feel like? Not just financially, but mentally, emotionally. That's the vision, not just success, but stability, not just growth, but control. And now, you have the framework to build it. But remember, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens step by step, system by system, decision by decision. And every time you choose structure over chaos, you move closer. Every time you choose design over reaction, you build something stronger. And over time, it becomes your reality. Now, as we move toward the final chapter, there's one last thing you need to hear. Not about business, not about systems, but about you. Because everything you've built, everything you've learned, everything you're capable of now, it all comes down to one thing, whether you decide to actually live it. And that is what we close with next. Chapter 19. The quiet decision that changes everything. There won't be a perfect moment, no announcement, no signal, no clear sign that says, now is the time. Because the truth is, the moment that changes everything is quiet. It's not dramatic. It's not emotional. It's not even visible to anyone else. It's a decision, a simple one, to stop building the old way, to stop reacting, to stop carrying everything, to stop being the center of something that was never meant to depend on you, and instead, to build differently. This is where everything becomes real, because up until now, you've been learning, understanding, seeing things from a new perspective. But this is where you choose not what sounds good, not what feels exciting, but what you will actually do. Because nothing changes until behavior changes, let's be honest. You already know what needs to be done. You've seen the systems. You've understood the structure. You've recognized the patterns. So this is not about knowledge anymore. It's about execution. And execution doesn't require perfection. It requires movement. Let me say something clearly. You don't need a complete plan. You need a starting point. That's it. Because the moment you start, clarity increases, confidence builds, momentum begins. But if you wait, if you delay, if you overthink, nothing moves. And over time, you drift back into old habits, back into reactive thinking, back into being needed for everything, not because you have to, but because you didn't interrupt the pattern. This is why the decision matters. Not a big decision, not a life-changing announcement, just a quiet commitment. I'm going to build this differently. That's it. Now let's make this real. What is one thing, one small part of your business that you can change today? Not everything, just one. One process you can define. One task you can systemize. One decision you can structure. That's where it begins. Because once you do that, you create proof. Proof that this works. Proof that you can build differently. And that proof changes your behavior, because now you're not guessing, you're experiencing it. And once you experience it, you want more of it. More clarity, more structure, more freedom. And that's how momentum builds. Not through massive action, but through consistent, intentional steps. Let's connect this to something deeper. There's a pattern across everything we've explored. People wait for motivation. They wait to feel ready. They wait for the right conditions. But the people who actually change their lives do something different. They act before they feel ready. They build before they feel confident. They move before everything is clear. And that movement creates everything else. Let me give you a line to carry forward. Clarity is not found before action. It is created through action. So don't wait. Don't wait for the perfect plan. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until everything makes sense. Start with what you have, where you are, and build from there. Because every system you create, every process you define, every decision you remove from your daily thinking moves you closer to something powerful. Independence, not just financially, but mentally. You stop carrying everything in your head. You stop reacting to every situation. You stop being overwhelmed by constant decisions. And that changes how you live. And now, those things have changed. You no longer accept chaos as normal. You no longer confuse busyness with progress. You no longer build things that trap you. You build differently. You build with intention. You build with structure. You build with freedom in mind. And that means everything you create from this point forward carries that same foundation. Not just your business, your routines, your environment, your decisions, your time. Because now you see patterns. You see where effort is wasted. You see where systems are missing. You see where structure can create space. And once you see that, you can't go back. Let me give you the final line, the one that stays, the one that defines everything. If it depends on you, redesign it. If it runs without you, you built it right. That's it. Simple, clear, and powerful. Because you can apply it anywhere. Your business, your work, your life. And every time you do, you move closer to something most people never fully experience. Freedom that lasts. Not temporary, not fragile, but built intentionally. Now, before we close, there's one more thing. This wasn't just something to listen to. This was something to use. So, if even one part of this hit you, if one idea shifted how you think, if one line made you pause, then don't let it stay here. Use it. Build something from it. And if you're serious about this path, make a personal contract with yourself right now. Not a loud one, not something you announce, but something real. A decision that says, I will not build things that trap me anymore. That's your commitment. And if that resonates with you, take a moment. Hit like, not for the video, but as a signal to yourself that you're choosing a different standard. Leave a comment, not for attention, but to declare one system you're going to build next. And if you want to stay on this path, stay consistent, stay accountable, stay building, because this is not the end. This is the beginning of a different way of thinking, a different way of working, a different way of living, and if you made it this far, you're already ahead. Now the only question is, what will you build next? And what kind of life will that create? Because from this point forward, that decision is yours.